This is a Chinese trench that dates from the Korean War. And it's incredible to find this because very little remains of the Korean War. Typically, the Chinese dug these trenches into the heights, which gave the defenders the maximum advantage. This is a gun pit he would use, and you can see the advantage that the defender would have on any attackers. What's remarkable about this position is that it was captured by the Canadians during the action at Chailly. During May and June 1951, the Canadians would join with United Nations forces in a major offensive to drive the communists back into North Korea. And to be successful, they would have to overcome positions such as this and a very determined enemy.
I just started running up towards the command post, and I saw this figure looming out of the dark. And then the next thing I saw was something coming through the air. It was a bowling pin grenade. It bounced off my chest, and I had two ways to go. I went right, the grenade had gone left.
This is the South Gate, and it's one of the few buildings that remains from ancient Korea, and it's even one of the few buildings that remains from the Korea of 1950s. One of the problems in retracing the steps of the Korean War is so much has changed that there's only a few buildings that still remain. This is a 14th century Asian-type pagoda, and you can actually see the bullet holes from the occupation of Seoul in 1950 by North Korean forces. And of course, there's one other place we can go, which is the old traditional market. This is the Namdaemun market, and it's a traditional Korean market, much like one of those that you would have seen in the 1950s or during the war. Mind you, the product lines have changed. There's a lot of traditional Korean fare, and I'm going to buy a traditional Korean hot dog on a stick with French fries stuck in the side. It looks like quite a delicacy. Get one of these. Thank you. This is very good for your cholesterol. Markets like this are vanishing in Korea, but of course, during the war and afterwards, this is where all the commerce was done. And it still has a traditional flavor to it, just like the ketchup on my hot dog. Between 1951 and 1953, more than 20,000 Canadians fought in Korea. And although the country has changed dramatically, if we look hard enough, we can still uncover evidence of the war. So during the Korean War, one of the things that everybody talks about, every one of the veterans, is the Korean porters and how they carried all the supplies up the hills. And one of the things they used was these A-frames. And they're still being used today in the market here. I guess you can rent them out and they can come and deliver product to somebody in the market. But it's amazing that this is what everybody talks about. And here's an example of one of them. Since June 1950, Korea has been a battleground. A series of fierce battles between United Nations forces and the communist armies of North Korea and China have left the country in ruins and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. By the spring of 1951, the communist armies have captured territory south of the 38th parallel. But now the UN is gearing up for a massive counterstroke. Joining the UN forces are thousands of newly arrived Canadian soldiers under the command of Brigadier John Rockingham. This special contingent of volunteers is known as the 25th Canadian Infantry Brigade. We're driving through the valleys where the 25th Canadian Infantry Brigade advanced in May 1951. It was part of the push north towards the 38th parallel, and this was the first action for a number of the Canadian battalions, including the 2nd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment. And with me is Ed Mastronardi, who's coming back to this area for the first time since 1951. And Ed, what was it like for you guys before you came into the line here?
Rockingham wanted us all to get into shape. So he conceived an exercise called Charlie Horse, which was to be a series of company attacks up the hills just outside of Puzan. I had 20 scouts and snipers, and we climbed the hill twice a day, and using blank ammunition, we were to be the enemy, the Chinese. Rockingham was determined that we weren't going to move anywhere till he felt we were ready.
After only 2 weeks of training, the Canadians are ordered into action, and they begin their advance north through the Panchon Valley, pursuing the fleeing Chinese army. So this is the Panchon Valley,
Yes,
where you fought,
that's right.
May 1951, and today it's a resort. There's hiking trails all through your old battlefield.
And a lot of very happy-looking people. Women, children. That makes me very happy that I came to see it again. It was different then, though. It wasn't all the vegetation. And because of the bombing.
And it'd be clear of trees.
The clear trees, because with the napalm, they would have burned the trees off. You see.
Right.
And probably almost halfway down.
So you would then, would you go up the crests, or would you go?
We went up the crests. We followed those ridge lines. Canadians, we were like that. We always looked at the high ground. High ground is a dominant feature. It's the hardest work, but it is the safest way to go. It's worth the sweat.
This is your first taste of battle.
It was the first day, May the 25th in the afternoon. We came on 407, and I was moving up 407, and trying to set a good example for the men, I took the point. About a third of the way up 407, as I moved around a corner, a Chinese soldier came from underneath the boulders. I didn't see him at all. He was just going to shoot me in the back, and my signaler shot him. And I saw these Chinese going down, and Command's like a big smile on their face, said, "You're only one." We just started, and how close I had come, and it made me realize that, this was going to be serious. They were just trying to slow us down at this point. And we thought they would keep doing that. But that turned out not to be the case. They finally stopped, and they were going to stop us.
By the end of May, the UN push towards North Korea begins to stall. The 2nd RCRs are ordered north to secure the village of Shaili and capture the dominating height of Hill 467. But the Canadians are unaware that Shaili protects a critical communist supply route, and the Chinese are unlikely to give it up without a fight. We are on the outskirts of the village of Shaili, which was the battlefield of the 2nd RCR at the end of May 1951. One of the Canadians who fought here was Ed Mastronardi. Well, the country was certainly very different than anything you're used to. You're going into a completely strange environment.
Oh, absolutely. And remember too that it was so miserable for the people. I mean, well, they were virtually all refugees. They were frightened. They were terrified. They were frightened. And looking around here and being able to sit in this place and this village, after what the shattering and the shelling and the cleaning we took, it kind of seemed like it was kind of all worthwhile. And it was really wonderful. And it kind of makes you feel kind of proud.
I'll have some more beer myself. Ed, ready to go?
Yeah,
We're gonna go and try to find your old route up to Hill 467.
Okay, let's do that.
On May 30th, the Canadians spearhead the UN advance north. And at 7 a.m., the 700 men of the RCRs launched their assault towards the village of Shaili. The plan calls for a four-pronged assault. A Company will lead the attack to secure the village. B and C are to protect the flanks, while D Company attacks the main objective, the high ground on Hill 467.
In the distance, I could see 467. We thought they're going to have to stop somewhere. And we figured that probably would be it. And Rockingham decided he was going to halt the brigade there. And he no sooner stopped us than we heard pop, 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 pop.
So Ed, do you recognize any of these features?
Oh, yes. This looks like the two Twin Peaks, 464, 467. I look at the hills and I think of all the centuries. And here they are, still the same, exactly the same. And for centuries being the same. There have been a lot of campaigns waged over here, I'm sure. It's a very appropriate day to be here. I can feel it like it was. Yeah, yeah. In that direction is the Chirwan Valley, and that was the main supply route from Manchuria for the Chinese troops. So that's why they reacted to our arrival here.
You poked a hornet's nest.
Yes, we poked a hornet's nest. A Company was to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, and at that time there was an airstrike planned, but the weather was so bad, it had been a driving rain all night, that they had to cancel the airstrike. We couldn't get the proper artillery support. But one of the critical things was the maps we had were based on pre-war Japanese maps, and their scale was different. It wasn't until we did the actual reconnaissance, and they said, oh my God, we're too far apart. The valley was so cloudy and misty, you could only see a few hundred yards up the road. Because when Medlin and A Company left on the half tracks, and the tanks moved up towards Shaili itself, they'd gone about maybe 300 or 400 yards and just disappeared in the mist. We couldn't see them.
This is the old village of Shaili, and on May 30th, 1951, it was the objective of A Company of the Royal Canadian Regiment. And by 7 a.m., they had secured the village, and of course this allowed the other parts of the operation to take place, particularly against 467, the big height to the north. But by 11 a.m., all along the front, everyone was noticing a lot more Chinese activity. They were mortaring the positions, there was more artillery coming in. And here in Chailly, they could see that the Chinese were trying to infiltrate around their positions to the rice paddies in the south and along the ridges to the north. From here you can see where C Company would have been on that ridge over here. And of course they had a pretty quiet day. It was so dark and the mist was so low that they really couldn't do much up there, but they held their positions well. But on the big height, you can see the Twin Peaks up there at 467. The fighting was really intensifying. The men of D Company advance up the steep ridges leading to the summit of Hill 467. But as they near the top, they come under heavy machine gun fire from well-entrenched Chinese positions. This is one of the ridges that leads to the top of Hill 467. And this position was very important to the Chinese. And you can see this by the fact they dug in so well that even after 50 years, their gun pits are still here. You can see they used stone. You can see a little mound here to protect the gunner. And of course, it's here to protect the re-entrant on this side of the ridge. On the morning of May 30th, 1951, 11 Platoon of the Royal Canadian Regiment stormed this ridge and, believe it or not, took it very quickly. And then they proceeded to advance to the summit. They were supposed to meet up with number 12 Platoon, who were advancing up that ridge over there. The problem is the Chinese machine guns on the summit had stopped their advance and inflicted many casualties.
We were coming up a well-worn path to a bit of an open area when a machine gun opened up. Some of the guys were left in the open. Paddy O'Connor said, "To hell with it. I'm going after my boys."
As the battle for 467 rages, the situation deteriorates. Despite the courage of the Canadians, they've yet to capture the crest. Desperate for information on why the attack is stalled, the CO orders his intelligence officer, Ed Mastronardi, to find out what's going wrong. So you've been told to go and find out what's going on.
What's going on? Exactly, because we couldn't get communication, and we're getting all these reports that the Chinese were moving down, and he wanted to know, well, where are they?
So up
We
here,
couldn't see anything.
you come up this valley.
Yeah,
Now, those are the two peaks, right?
yeah.
That's 464.
467, that's right.
Okay.
And they were moving up, they were moving up that side, there.
Okay. What did you think when you saw them?
I said, oh my God, we got a problem. And then when I reported it to Keane, the first thing he had to do was to tell Rockingham. And when he told Rockingham, with Midland in trouble here, he had ordered Keane to pull back to the start line.
Does Rockingham made the decision right away?
Oh yeah, right away. If we hadn't had so much experience in these men, it would have been a disaster. But a lot of the guys were Second War vets, and they cooled down the new guys, and this was you couldn't have had a more important learning experience for what was to come in the future than the battle we fought here.
At Chailly, the RCRs fought a bitter battle against the odds. Although they came close to being surrounded, skillful leadership and experience helped them avert disaster. In the end, they suffered 31 casualties, including 6 killed.
It made us a fighting battalion, and also it tested the mettle of the men and the leadership, which, taking everything into consideration, was really excellent. We were ready for war, and we couldn't have been as ready for war unless we'd gone through this.
The next day, attacking with overwhelming numbers and air support, Shaili falls to the Americans. And over the next month, the UN forces continue to push back an exhausted Chinese army. In July 1951, the Chinese surprised the UN by requesting peace talks. It now appears that the Korean War may soon be over. We're on the road to Panmunjom, which is the joint security area, which is where North Korea and South Korea actually meet. And it's there that they try to negotiate any changes or issues that take place even today. It was also the location of the peace talks back in the fall of 1951. So it's just further on down the road, but it's right in the demilitarized zone. So as we go along, you go through stages of militarization. And as we get closer, you can see more gun emplacements, more soldiers, and more barbed wire, because you're really getting now back into what is a war zone. This is the joint security area at Panmunjom, and this is where the peace treaty negotiations took place during most of the Korean War. Today, this is still the front line between North Korea and South Korea. You can see the North Koreans are literally across that concrete slab to the other side. And you're being watched at all time. In fact, there's a North Korean right behind me with the binoculars and that guard post over there watching us very, very closely. And of course, in this building, it's built across the military demarcation line, which is the actual border between North and South Korea. And that's where they have their conferences, and we can go in there and have a look. It's got quite a history. This building is used for negotiations between the North and the South, Americans and the joint security agencies, and the communists. And of course, what's unique about this building is it's built right along the border between North and South Korea. This table marks the line. The set of microphones along here is the border, and I'm now in North Korea. There's a lot of problems in these negotiations. There's a lot of little propaganda pieces being used all the time. You'll often see North Korean soldiers peering through the windows and making certain types of gestures like this. This is another example of how the North Koreans try to irritate the South Koreans. Both sides cannot occupy this building at the same time, so they have to bolt at one end or the other. So this door leads to the north. So when the South Koreans go to leave, a soldier has to come back here and unbolt it. And in the past, the North Koreans have waited for that and tried to grab the soldier and pull him through into North Korea. So now a second soldier has to hold this position and hold the other soldier by his belt as he undoes the bolt. But the difficulty in dealing with the communists has been going on for a long time. This goes back to the Korean War, where the negotiations were taking place in this area, and they would break down and then men would die. And one of the situations in '51 is the communists went to the table as a delaying action, which would allow them time to regroup their troops, bring up more troops, and then launch further attacks on the UN forces. In the fall of 1951, the peace talks break down, and in an effort to restart the negotiations, the UN resumes its offensive. The Canadians advance quickly through the rugged Korean terrain and capture a series of hills east of the Samishan River Valley. The responsibility of holding the strategically important Hill 187 goes to the 2nd RCRs. The men dig in, wire positions, and construct outposts on the many spurs that extend into no man's land. The most exposed outpost is the Sangok, only 800 meters from the Chinese lines. Okay, so What I'm thinking of is down here. Take the binoculars. We'll look it out on the map. See the saddle?
That's right. Yes. That's, no, I think you've got it. Norm, that's it. That's it. My God, amazing. Outside of the fact it's got a bit more vegetation, looks not a lot different than we did then. They wanted the outpost manned by the most experienced platoons, and that one happened to be mine. And that's my birthday, the 2nd of November, and I saved a few quarts of beer, and I brought my section commander, my corporals in, and they wished me a happy birthday. And it was about 7:30, quarter to 8, and Jack Sargent, with my senior corporal, he was going to return to his position. He suddenly shouted, and he yelled, "Hey, boss, they're coming." We could hear some movement up towards the wire. And suddenly a voice shouted out in absolutely perfect English, "Canada boy, tonight you die." I got kind of startled. I said, "Well, come and get us, you son of a bitch." And they did. My signal said, "They're just over to the left." And there were 3 of them running right towards me. I had a flare pistol and my 9mm Browning. I shot 2 of them with my 9mm and 1 with the flare pistol. I put a new mag in my 9mm, and then suddenly they charged us through the same gap again. And there was a bugler standing there, oblivious to anything, blowing away, and he was moved within 10 feet. And I shot the bugle right to the back of his neck. It was a terrible thing, but there it went. But we didn't hear any more bugle call from there. Suddenly Jack Sargent reported, "They're coming in on me." They blew a gap from between 6 and 8 feet wide, and then they charged. Eddie Bauer, a Bren gunner, just sat there, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And he filled that effort, and he just kept shooting until it was still. There was a lot of shouting and screaming, and so that stopped that particular attack. By this time, I was getting a report of casualties, wounded here, wounded there. I remember I had 28 men. So by this time, I had about 10 casualties. We didn't know it until after, but we were being hit by a full battalion of Chinese. That's, anywhere between 800 and 900 men. So I reported back that we're running out of ammunition. And I said, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. And suddenly a voice came booming on an effort. "This is Big Sunray." It was the brigadier. He said, "Ed, you've got to hold. You're the cork in the bottle." I said, "I'll do the best I can, sir." I reported back. I said, "I have nothing left. Most of my wire was gone. We won't stop the next one. We just can't." Middleman said, "Do you think you can get out?" I said, "I won't leave without my wounded. Because you boxed me out with artillery." Then it was just a matter of moving out of the wire. And then I called in the stonk, and they started hammering the position. So I'd move back 50 up, what I thought was about 50 yards, and I would say, "Drop 50. And they just keep repeating that. Now, we just kept moving with that. It was well after 4 before the first elements of my guys got to the company wire. I had, at that point, I had 15 wounded, 1 killed,
and we left Campo. One platoon was given the order to reoccupy the position, and I said, I want to go back too. I want to go back. I want to get Campo. We saw Chinese bodies hanging on a wire in the position, and by the time in the Monday count, it was anywhere between 45 and 50. And we picked up 5 wounded prisoners. And there was Campo in the slit trench with his rifle. He'd been protecting the wounded. And I'm glad I lived long enough to be able to let them be recognized for what they did, because they're all dead now. I'm the last one.
I remember them every birthday, every 2nd of November is my time. I think about Remembrance Day. My Remembrance Day is the 2nd of November. I've never forgotten it, and I do the same thing every 2nd of November. I get by myself, I pour myself a drink, and I sit there and I think about 2 platoon, Able Company, the Flying Deuce, and 28 heroes.
The incredible defense of the Sangok by the 2nd RCRs stops the Chinese attack. But within days, further along the Canadian line, the Chinese strike again. We are traveling on the highway north of Seoul, and with me is George Ferris, who fought with the 2nd Battalion Vandues in the fall of 1951. And this is the first time George has been back to Korea.
We're going to take George back to the old battleground where his unit fought a major action and a significant action on the saddle between Hill 227 and Hill 355.
That was the worst place to be at that time, because the Chinese wanted all these positions, and we didn't want to give them to them.
Throughout November, the Chinese attacked the UN front and recaptured several major heights, leaving Hill 355 as the critical anchor of the UN line. In an effort to strengthen this key position, on November 22nd, the Vandues are ordered to occupy the dangerously exposed positions in front of the hill.
The area that you fought on is still essentially at war.
Well, it's on the demarcation line, or
Yeah, just
DMZ?
It's right inside the DMZ.
Yeah.
So as we get closer, we'll see the barbed wire and the minefield signs. And
we don't have to go in the minefields.
no.
Okay.
No. Oh, well, if we do, you have to leave.
George, here we are.
I see some of it. Oh, yeah.
So we're going to take the what would be the supply route up, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Up to what would have been the Jeep head.
Yeah.
So you'll see all the stuff just like it was back in 1951.
Yeah, except for the bombing.
Yeah, no bomb.
Yeah, good.
Hopefully no bomb.
There we go. Pack up on the hill. This is getting familiar now a bit more than I thought after all. I hadn't seen it for almost 55 years.
So we're going to go up to the GP that's right on the shoulder of,
Oh, yeah.
off the peak.
Yeah.
And from there we'll get the view of
Yeah.
the Chinese positions 227.
Yeah. Well, there it is. I see 227 there, and I see also the hill where at the bottom we parked our vehicles and climb up that hill to go right on the saddle. As I was going up to take the position, I met the British coming out of the hill. And as they came down, they said, okay, good luck, guys. Be careful, at 4 o'clock, the enemy will start firing at you. And we took it with a grain of salt, you know. We got up on top of the hill, and it was a hot dog stand that they had their weapon in. My couple and I didn't like the idea of going in a hot dog stand, so we decided to move the gun. And around 4 o'clock, as they had predicted, they start firing. I said, if we would have been in there, we would have been dead today, you know. Well, the first night we carry on digging, and we were being shelled by the enemy. You're in your hole, and you keep your head down, and you hope that it's going to stop soon, and it's scary. We had a dugout. The roof was supported by a beam of wood. I don't know where they got this tree here, but a big piece of a big beam of wood. One of our guys was in there, and when that bunker fell, and when that was hit with a heavy bomb, the beam splintered, and one side of the beam got into the stomach of the guy and killed him on the spot there. You wish that it ends quick, and when it's heavy, you feel like a rat, you're caught. There was question about thoughts of retreating. Never did it came to the mind of any of the men in the company or the battalion. As a matter of fact, our CO told us that it's going to be hard. There'll be no panic, no overrun, and no withdrawing. There was never any thought of retreating. The Vandus don't retreat. They stay and fight.
Right now, George and I are traveling along the DMZ towards Hill 210. We are hoping to get a better view of the saddle between Hills 227 and 355, where George fought with the Vandus in November 1951.
Well, now it's starting to look like something that I recognize. I see it in the way that I used to see it. Oh, wow.
Here, we'll go over here. This is it?
Yeah,
This is it, George?
yeah. Now I see it better. The west side of 355. Oh,
This is
wow,
much,
wow.
Much better than the other point. The other point we were up too high.
Yeah, I couldn't see it now.
So we're setting it up. The Americans are on the hill proper.
That's right.
And you guys are D companies in that little hollow area?
D company in the saddle there.
So where did you have your guns?
I had one gun right in the middle. I was with that one gun, right in the middle of the dip there, and on the forward position.
So you're very, very close to 227 all the time.
227, I said a guy with maybe a 7 or 6 iron playing golf could have put a ball on top of the hill there. That's how close we were.
On the 23rd, the Chinese launched the major assault on 355, and they
Okay.
drive off the Americans. The Americans bugged out.
Yeah,
Now,
you're right, yeah.
You're now in a very bad position because
Yeah.
the Chinese have 227,
And they have,
this huge,
That's right.
humongous Hill 355,
Yeah.
and you guys are piggy in the middle.
Hundreds of Chinese troops swarm onto the heights of 355, driving the Americans from the hill. Now they turn their attention to the Canadians and begin to attack the Vandus from 3 directions. If the Chinese can dislodge the defenders from the saddle, they will control Hill 355 and threaten all the Canadian positions to the south.
Our forward platoon is in a very bad situation because 227, the enemy on that position, could see that platoon. So they were just firing down on them. After trying hard, they could not hold the position. So they just moved the platoon out of there. And then here I am in the thick of battle, trying to see somebody, ready to shoot. And then I hear some noise, some people climbing the hill. Then I heard somebody say in French to me, don't fire, this is Lieutenant Macduff from the Vandus. And my fingers were white from pressing on that trigger. I was just about to let it. I almost killed the poor people. I almost killed them. But I didn't. And one of the soldiers was told probably to go and report to the major that they had been overrun and they had moved to join the other platoon. So he said, are the men all gone? He said, yes, they're all gone. So that's when he asked for support fire, tank fire, to hit the position where the enemy had captured. And then during that evening, Leo Major, one of our scout and sniper, they went up and checked that position.
When we reached the crest, we charged the enemy positions, firing as we ran. Not long after, we could see a large enemy force preparing for a counterattack. I waited until they were almost on top of us, and then I called in the mortar barrage.
It got so heavy. It was unbelievable. It seems that our support, all our artillery and mortars were firing at the same time as the enemy was doing the same thing. Around the end of the day, on the 24th, then it seems that the Chinese saw that they couldn't take it, and they probably decided at that time to withdraw.
The Chinese attack on Hill 355 was a major initiative to force back the UN front. It was the stand made by the Vandus against enormous odds that saved the day. Chinese losses were estimated in the thousands, while the Vandus suffered 49 casualties. Their defense of the saddle ranks with Kapyong as one of the finest actions fought by the Canadians in the Korean War.
I start realizing when we went to the South Gate and I looked at all the buildings, and then I looked at all the people, families, little kids with them. They all had smiles on their face. Around where I was, I kept looking at them. And I said, these people are happy. And I said, this is because of us. Yeah. And that's the first time. Canadians, man or woman that came here, should be proud. They did a goddamn good job. And I'm proud, and I'm especially proud of my regiment. Le 22. Je me souviens.
After the stand by the Vandus on the saddle at Hill 355, UN Command issued orders to stop offensive operations. The focus now is going to be on the peace talks. That changed the face of the war from one of movement to static warfare, much like the First World War. So that meant trenches and barbed wire, minefields, and patrols. It was a war more of their father's generation than their own. But it was clear that the fighting was far from over.